Episode 24. Kate and I discuss Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 7, The Dragon and the Wolf. We're a little bit later getting this one out, but that's alright. We've had some time to reflect on it and watch the episode twice. It's kind of a strange episode. My notes are a total mess, as the show would present questions and then answer them halfway through. And the most shocking thing that happened was nothing shocking happened at all. But that's not really a criticism because it was still pretty riveting and I was watching every second very closely. So pretty solid, but I just thought kind of strange. What do you think?
I don't think I would call it strange myself. I definitely found the episode entertaining, but it wasn't spectacular. We've definitely had much better season finales. But that may have to do a little bit with the editing and the way that they're telling the story.
So let's start at where I thought was the weakest point, which was Winterfell. Rest in peace, Peter Baelish, Littlefinger. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you and I speculated that he was going to go, and that it would be unfortunate the fact that his character is capable of so much more and that he's supposed to be this grand manipulator, and to go out in that way. That part for me was a bit disappointing just because he's a great character to hate. It's like Cersei going out in kind of too much of an easy way. Like, part of me doesn't buy that he was completely hoodwinked by Sansa, or they just didn't tell the story well enough. Like, they could have pulled it off that same way, but just done better.
Yeah, so the big reveal was that the trick was on Baelish.
All along.
All along. They set him up, but in reality, the trick is on us, the viewers. And it kind of made me concerned that going forward, the showrunners are going to give us tricky narratives that are unreliable. There's only one season left, so it's hard to say, but I just felt like it was a big, like, look how clever we are as showrunners. We tricked you, you know. I think this is the first time where the show was deliberately feeding us bullshit so that they could stretch out a scene that should have happened in the second episode. And I guess Sansa learned something is the moral of what happened. But
I think the show was trying to convey to us that Sansa is no longer this helpless little girl who is naive about pretty much everything. Not only has she figured out how people in the world are, she's figured out how to play the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, well, we seem to have thought that in season 5 as well, when she came out in her little black dress and then was immediately married to the Boltons.
Well, and that might have been one more lesson. Like she said in this episode, I'm a slow learner, but I learn. And I think what it was is she did learn a lot from, Baelish, but she still trusted him. And then she learned you can't trust pretty much anyone except for true family, which is Bran and Arya and Jon. I think that we believed Sansa a little bit more with this because of her stuff going on with Jon. I think that's legit. I don't think that was misdirection.
Her conflicts with Jon, you mean?
Yeah, like stuff from last season that carried over to the very beginning of this season.
Well, I basically only have 3 things to say about the Littlefinger thing. The first one is I did like that he was a little crybaby at the end. That's just,
you did like?
Yeah, he's a schmarmy little guy who always thinks he's so smarter than everyone, and he got exposed and he showed what a cowardly person he is. But the biggest part that showed just how dumb so much of this was written is that he's like, I protected you, Sansa, and she's like, when you married me off to the Boltons, and he had no answer to that because it was clearly a giant freaking plot hole that made 0 sense at all. So why he married her to the Boltons, never explained. Doesn't make any sense. Even in that episode, she's like, are you sure I should marry him or something? And he's like, well, they're going to fight Stannis and either they'll win or lose. And it's like, wait, this makes 0 sense. So she called him out on that, and he predictably had no response because it was dumb. I have written down in my notes, plot hole. It made me think of that. And then
I was a bit surprised at how surprised he was. He was so clearly shocked.
He must have been watching the show. Like in Spaceballs, when they're watching themselves.
But I mean, again, for a guy who's so on it and has so much information all the time, and he's so good at knowing stuff and reading people and guessing people, he was so far off with this. And I get it. Who is likely to think that Arya is as badass as she is? I mean, really, like, she's still very young, and yet she's just lethal.
Well, he knew that, at least from the fight with Bran, knew that she was talented.
But he underestimated her. Like, he didn't just underestimate Sansa. He underestimated Arya, too. He underestimated both of them.
The only other thought I had on it, and this probably doesn't matter at all, but the big thing in the North is that whoever gives the sentence swings the blade, and this was a departure from that.
Right, but Sansa's pretty tall and has some...
Right, it might have just been logistics.
But she would never have been able to lift up a greatsword. But I mean, are women... Let alone to cut off someone's head.
Are women that takes some serious... excluded from that rule?
What's that?
Are women excluded from that rule?
No, Brienne could do it no problem. But Sansa has never picked... Like, long swords are really heavy.
She could have cut the throat, same as Arya.
Well, he would have to lie there very quietly and patiently while she brought it up.
Right. I'm just saying it was a little departure from the way things have always been done in the North. Anything else about Littlefinger?
There's one other thing that I can add about Littlefinger, since there won't be any more opportunity to do so. It goes back to that knife that was used to kill Bran in season 1. There seems to be a difference in the show and the books, and I don't know how consequential it's going to be that there is this difference, if at all. In the books, it's never really stated who hired that guy to kill Bran. Although it's pretty strongly implied, as I think it's under Jaime's chapters, where he basically figures out it was actually Joffrey. And it was Robert who had won it. There was some sort of jousting tournament, and Littlefinger, it was his blade, and he lost it to Robert. And then Robert doesn't really care about all his weapons. He's got so many that he wouldn't notice such a nice knife going missing. And Joffrey stole it, and it was smart enough, though, to hire someone else to do the dirty work, and likely did it to gain Robert's affection, because Robert had once stated in front of the kids that they euthanize pets when they go lame, but they don't do it to a kid. And this is all in the books, so it's very different here than in the books. And who's behind it? So
they're saying in the show, I can't remember if they said this, that Littlefinger sent the assassin to kill Bran, but in the books it was Joffrey. Well, whatever the case, maybe we'll find out in the books that Littlefinger prompted Joffrey to do it, or whatever. We know Littlefinger's behind so much in the books, and he's going to get a much better death. It'll probably be at the hands of Sansa, and maybe Sansa and Arya, but it's not going to be Scooby-Dooey.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess just to wrap it up, I didn't like how they did this with the sisters. It got to be so outrageous to me that it became obvious what it really was. It wasn't clever to me. I thought it was pretty poorly done.
Yeah, me too. It was tricksy. Okay, so now let's go to the beginning, I guess. So it starts off with a lot of cool meetings and reunions at King's Landing. We get a little conversation between the surrogate parents of Arya, Brienne and the Hound, and they both...
talking about Arya, and talking about how they both mean to protect her and don't mean her any ill will. It's funny, because you mentioned that we watched this episode twice. The first time, I thought when Brienne was saying that the only one who's going to have trouble is the one who bothers her from Brienne. But then the second time we watched it, I actually took that to mean as a compliment to Arya, that the only one who's going to have a problem is because Arya can take care of herself now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It was meant to be that Arya is going to be able to handle herself, and the Hound said he wasn't going to bother getting in her way. And there was no animosity between the Hound and Brienne.
Which just goes to show how they come from a very different code and class of fighters compared to so many of the other warriors in Westeros, that they are people who can respect skill and can respect, like, basically they were both trying to fight for Arya, and she nearly killed him, and there wasn't ill will there. And that's pretty impressive, especially for a guy like the Hound who wants to kill his older brother for what he did to him.
Now, both Brienne and the Hound know Arya is alive, so next season, if Jon is shocked to find Arya alive, I'm going to be a little I guess, annoyed that nobody mentioned it to him. And also Gendry, like nobody's telling Jon, like, oh, by the way, I've spent some time with your sister, but whatever. Well, they'll get their little reunion. I just feel like at this point somebody would have told Jon that she's alive.
Yeah, the only thing is they did point out in this episode that because of the winter storms, it's taking ravens a longer time to get through if they do it all, even though all the ones that need to get through for the plot have no problem getting through with jetpacks on all their wings. So it could be that they tried sending him a raven to say, hey, Arya's home, and he maybe didn't get it.
Yeah, but Brienne saw Arya at Winterfell and is now with Jon at King's Landing.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so he should know by now.
Yeah, because everybody's there. The only principal characters who weren't at that meeting are the Stark girls.
Yeah.
And Bran, I guess.
And I like those interactions. Bronn and Tyrion and Pod, they all are kind of cool to watch together. And I thought the whole thing was directed well. A lot of sideways glances and kind of funny looks. I would have liked to have seen a little more, I guess, talking out of maybe Davos and Jorah, maybe, but they didn't. I don't know why.
But I don't know if that's how something of that caliber would go. I think only the main people. So you've got 2 queens and a king there. There's not really a whole lot of time for other people to talk. And even when Euron started talking, they were like, shut up and sit down.
Yeah.
This was really a time where when you're an advisor, you stand there and you sit there, which all those people were there. Grey Worm was there, and Missandei was there, Jorah was there.
I think Grey Worm was outside.
He might have been outside.
Yeah.
But like all those people were there, even if they didn't have a whole lot of like talking time. But the only main people really talking were the royalty people, so to speak.
Well, the scene was still like 30 minutes long. If they would have given everyone FaceTime, it would have been
ridiculous. But I don't it's not like a small council meeting. I think that was more accurate. I remember thinking, God, why is Bronn and Pod walking off? That makes no sense. It almost gives the sense that like something bad's going to happen, and which even gets like we're fed even more of that possibility when the Hound's like, I don't want to die here. Am I going to die here? And
and also when the Hound told the guard not to touch the zombie or the white, I thought the stupid guard was going to let the white out and he was going to be running around killing people or something. But I think that was a strategy to build false tension to keep us.
Well, and I honestly think the only reason why Bronn and Pod left is nothing more than the fact that Jerome Flynn, who plays Bronn, and Lena Headey, who plays Cersei, do not get along. They used to date back in the day, and they are never on the set at the same time. And I think that's the way that the show worked that out. So they weren't on the set at the same time because they haven't had to deal with it yet. But they couldn't avoid it here. And I think that's the only reason why. Does Bronn seem like someone who would leave something like that?
No, that's pretty funny though.
And why would Pod just be like, yeah, Bronn, let's just go hang out?
Personal lives can get in the way of that. Let me flip through some of my notes here and see what I wrote down.
One thing that I did notice, this isn't like very significant at all, I really appreciate the commitment to the character that a lot of these actors, like what they do. They do a lot of mannerisms. So for example, because of like all the processions and posturing that happened with this very long dragon pit scene, I was able to watch how Varys always walks with his hands in his robe. He's very consistent with that, and that's kind of part of what he does. Bronn's got his swagger, so he walks with his thumbs kind of hooked in his belt as part of swagger. Cersei, she always walks with folded hands. Dany, whenever she sat down, she always folded her hands. And maybe they're counseled, like, that's more regal looking. But even Cersei, she's walking around, like, all their walks, I was noticing, very much fit their characters. And I really appreciate how much the actors fine-tune that and are consistent with it. It just, the show is excellently casted, and I'm still amazed by that today.
Yeah, one thing I can never criticize about this show is the casting. I think almost all of it, 99% of it, has been so good based on the books and other things like that, and just the way you imagine the actors. Maybe we'll do a separate episode sometime specifically on casting and who's strong and who's not.
Yeah.
I noticed that when Dany showed up with her dragon, the mountain, you only see him a little bit, but he kind of steps out, like not scared of the dragon, to kind of protect Cersei. But then when the zombie comes running, the mountain was pretty slow on the take.
I have noticed that the mountain is a bit inconsistent with certain things. So, for example, he definitely uses his stance to communicate a lot. And like there was that time with Jaime where she nods and you're like, okay, she just gave him the go-ahead to kill him, but then all he does is take out his sword. But then there's the other time with Tyrion where Tyrion's like, do it. And then he takes out his sword and Cersei does nothing. And it's like, I don't really understand what causes him to pull his sword out 4 inches out of its sheath.
I think that the one with Jaime is that it seems childish to think of it this way, but Cersei must have had it pre-planned with the Mountain. We're going to intimidate him into not leaving.
Okay.
And then Jaime called her on it. Because at first I was like, wait, what just happened there? He said, she said do it and he didn't do anything. So I think that the Mountain has orders basically to intimidate Jaime into staying, but to not actually hurt him. And then,
I don't think there's much going on up there with the Mountain.
I know, but it's the only way to make sense of how it went down. So,
and I just want to point out, in the same episode, both brothers challenged Cersei to kill them, and she didn't.
Yeah. So, yeah, before we get to... I have some thoughts on the Jaime Tyrion thing, but before we get to that, one of the funny things about this episode is that when Euron was like, I'm out of here, these things don't swim, I'm going home, I wrote down, like, this must be a ploy. You know, that doesn't seem right to me. And then I thought we would find out next season if it was a ploy or not. But no, like 15 minutes later, they're like, yeah, no, it's a ploy.
Yeah, at least that fits his character, though. I didn't see him turning.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for him to just leave like that made no sense. Yeah.
And I also think that is a nail in the coffin for Jaime and Cersei's relationship, for Jaime to leave. Because she said, did you really think he would walk away from a marriage with the queen that easily? So she's basically telling him, I am going to go through with marrying this guy. And now that they're at a place where they don't have to hide, and they already aren't hiding, and she's carrying his child, or as far as he knows, and she does this, like, it's really a slap in the face for him about what he and their relationship really means to her, especially compared to her having power.
Nobody had to die for him to leave. We thought that Brienne might have to die for him to turn on Cersei.
There was airtime, though, more than twice. So first, when they all sit down, which I actually appreciated the first time they did this, where Brienne's staring at Jaime, and then Jaime's like looking at her, and then Cersei's staring at them, and Jaime, like, I kind of thought that was funny.
Busted.
But then it also happens at the very end when Brienne's trying to stop Jaime and say, hey, you know, you got to talk to her, and she's staring at him like, come on. You know, like, there's definitely something going on with those three where I feel like there's some foreshadowing there, because why bother to even have Cersei pay attention to all that so much?
Right, yeah. But at least she didn't have to die for it to happen. So that was kind of when we were thinking about what might turn Jaime against Cersei. We thought Brienne being killed somehow by Cersei would do it.
Well, I'm hoping that she's going to show up and like find him now that he's left. Like King's Landing, and we're going to have like a nice little reunion with them.
Well, yeah, probably. One of our predictions would be the Hound and the Mountain would fight this episode, and I was complaining about what a shitty job of setting it up they did. So we'll get that next season, but they actually set it up this season. So they reminded us...
They confirmed that they're...
Right, they reminded us that the Hound hates the Mountain, and just in case we forgot, there was no tension leading up to it for this season.
Well, I mean, the Hound says, you know who's coming for you, you've always known. And so it's going back to what I was saying, like, it was always going to be the Hound coming after the Mountain and his demise. But now the show is just blatantly saying, yep, this is going to happen, guys.
I still insist that he doesn't stand a chance on his own.
Maybe Brienne will help out.
Yeah, and one whiny thing I was talking about a couple seasons ago is I felt that Brienne defeating the Hound kind of undermined Clegane Bowl. Because if we think that the two Cleganes are the two baddest people in town, it makes their fight that much more epic. But if we know they're not really, it just makes it a little less epic.
Or he learns from that fight and is a better fighter because of it. And the Hound is a changed man now.
Yeah. And
the fact that he wasn't bitter towards Brienne shows how he cares about honor. He respects Brienne because he's able to step outside just having strong emotions about, oh, she like beat me. Even in the episode last season where we see him back for the first episode and Ian McShane's character is saying, oh yeah, I found you almost dead, and you know, how big was the guy, and he was blatant. He's like, it was a woman.
Yeah, he has no shame in it. And yeah, so one thing I noticed, which I talked about maybe 5 episodes ago, is that Qyburn took a very big interest in that White. And I said that Qyburn is going to take an interest in the White, or is going to... He knows how to make whatever the Mountain is. And he is obviously operating on a different scientific level than anyone else in the story.
Yeah.
So I assume that by him showing that interest, they're going to do something with that, but it's hard to predict what.
Or it was just like a clever, funny moment, maybe. But
right,
we do.
There's only 6 episodes left, so what can they? How much can they do?
Yeah. I think that's why it's more just supposed to be funny.
I don't have a good reason for why Dany wouldn't just torch Cersei when she said no. She torched Randall Tarley, happy enough.
Well, the dragon wasn't there.
It was just flying around. It could have been there.
Well, I don't think she whistles like a dog and Drogon shows up.
Why didn't she pre-plan it to have him there? Like, I'm just saying, if Randall doesn't bend the knee so he gets torched, and Cersei doesn't bend
because
the knee...
I think she's trying not to be like the Mad King who just burns people to get her way. Like, it's going to be found out that Cersei was torched because, for whatever reason, and people fill in the blanks. I think she's trying to be diplomatic to get the Lannisters and Cersei, who's the queen, to join the Great War.
I'm just saying that Tyrion dissuaded her from attacking King's Landing because of all the people that would be killed. But in this setting, there could have been like 6 people killed. And she would
Right, I think it's the image that she's trying to maintain or protect.
She didn't care about that with other people.
And then she had a conversation with Tyrion.
Yeah, well... Yeah, she could have done it though.
So... when Jon and Dany were discussing about the dragons in the pit and how, it was commented on of just like the dragons represented this major fearsome creature and thing of the Targaryen house. And by the end of it, because they were kept in this pit, they were just like as small as dogs. And that's something that the books talk about as well. You do have to start thinking, well, what's going to happen after all this is done? As long as we can assume that the Night's King is going to be defeated and the Long Nights, or the Second Long Night, or whatever we're going to call it, what's happening now is going to end. And the Great War, they win. And then the Westeros stuff, let's say Dany wins. What are they going to do with the dragons? Because they clearly state that the dragons don't know what's theirs and what's not. And we already know that the dragons will eat small children and things. That's why they built the dragon pit. Like, once you win with your weapons of mass destruction, which are dragons, what do you do with them? And it just begged me to really, think about that. It already happened in history once. What would Dany do with them? They wouldn't procreate anymore, right? I don't know. It would have to be Rhaegal and Drogon, and are they both boys? I don't know. Are they for sure the last dragons forever? But again, I was just thinking about what would happen, and then it got me to thinking, would anybody want to follow Dany anymore if she didn't have dragons?
Right. Well, they did make the point that that's what made the Targaryens special, and without them, they're nobody. So.
Or without them, they're just like everybody else.
They're regular people. Yeah, and that's kind of a weird claim to power, is that because you have power, you should be in power.
Well, and I just thought it was an interesting discussion that they gave airtime to, because you have to really consider that if Dany did win and the dragons are there, what is she going to do with them then when she doesn't need them anymore? Yeah,
it's a good point. And for the second time in this series, we heard Dany say that a dragon is not a slave. She said that, when she killed Reznak or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
And then she said that again this episode. But the irony is that a dragon is a slave and belongs to the Night's King. So it's, I guess, sad, or I don't know if this means anything. Maybe she can bring the dragon back. Probably nothing like that. But for some reason that came up twice, and the dragon is a slave.
The Night's King is a dragon rider. So we've always speculated who are the 3 dragon riders. Well, we've got 2. We've got Dany and the Night's King, and then clearly we've got Rhaegal, which makes sense for Jon to ride.
Yeah.
Another random thought that I had is, if all the Dothraki crossed the sea with Dany, the Dothraki were a huge, huge presence over in Essos. And if they're not there, what is happening over there without the Dothraki?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they were just roaming nomads, so I guess everyone else is...
They were very powerful roaming nomads who conquered other populations regularly and turned them into slaves.
So she did...
And sold them as slaves.
She did bring peace to Essos by taking the Dothraki out of there.
But, that's a huge change for taking all the Dothraki.
It's like when I mentioned that Stannis' sellswords are running around Westeros. It's like that times 100.
People just must be flourishing without the Dothraki coming by.
Yeah.
And if they got wiped out over in Westeros, would that be the end of a whole...
Well, I think she has a Khalasar. I don't think she has all the Khalasars. Well, I guess she did torch 8 leaders. So I don't know if she has all the Dothraki. I assume there's got to be a couple other random Khalasars over there. Yeah, no, it's a good point. All right, so yes, let's go. Tyrion has a little meeting with Cersei, and she can't kill him, either because she can't bring herself to kill her own family, or because she's worried about, retaliation from Dany.
I think it's more the latter. I honestly think that Cersei has no qualms about killing Tyrion on the basis that he's family.
Now, what made me nervous about this scene is that because of the Sansa Arya Littlefinger thing, where I no longer trust the storytellers to give us an honest depiction of what's happening, I'm afraid that when it cut to black, Tyrion and Cersei made some kind of agreement that we're not privy to. You see, and that.
Why are you afraid of that?
Well, Tyrion appears to be having some problems with Jon and Dany. He gave him that weird, creepy look when they were hooking up, which we'll talk about later. And I think Tyrion is going to betray Dany, at least in the books. So Dany gets advice from Quaithe, and Quaithe says, beware of all these people. The Mummer's Dragon, who is not in the show, is again Targaryen, and the Pale Mare, and all this stuff. And one of the things she says to be aware of is the Lion, who's going to betray her. And I'm pretty sure that that's Tyrion. And they seem to be moving that direction. It's very hard for me to imagine Tyrion betraying Dany for Cersei. It makes no sense to me.
But could he be like Varys, and could he betray Dany for Westeros?
Yes, right, exactly. And she is due for another betrayal, so...
And we do have a precedent of Tyrion acting that way, because if you go back to the Battle of Blackwater, he didn't do that just to save his family or to be a really great stand-in hand. He did it to save the city.
Right. Yeah, and that was something also... He felt very upset about the Tarleys being torched. And one thing Randall Tarley said was, I already have a queen. And it's not that... So you can say, oh, well, Randall betrayed Highgarden but wouldn't betray Cersei. But it's almost like a patriotic thing. What he's not willing to do is betray his country. And maybe Tyrion is feeling something like that.
One thing that we didn't say from the episode in which the Tarleys were torched was they did really go out of their way to have Randall Tarley, not only in the episode where he died, but the one in which he's reunited with Sam. He's very racist. He's racist against wildlings. He's racist against, the fact that Dany has Dothraki. And he really held it against Dany that even though she was born in Westeros, that she wasn't raised there.
Well, these are foreign invaders, was his point, as opposed to...
But she was born there.
A civil war or something. Right, but her army's not, and her...
Right, but...
She doesn't understand the culture and things like that.
But I think... A lot of his criticism isn't just that they're foreign. I mean, yes, it's because they're foreign because he's ethnocentric. And, it's...
Well, right, but...
He's not...
Tyrion's going to betray Dany for something, I think. And
he would put a mad king back on the throne if he was Westerosi over a benevolent or good ruler who wasn't. He's that blinded by his ethnocentric attitude. Right,
but you just said that Tyrion might betray out of love for nation or whatever. So that's the parallel I'm trying to draw.
Yeah, and I just mean this comment to be that we haven't commented about that as part of Tarly, and I think was relevant to his demise.
Yeah. I do have one other big thought on something with Cersei, but I don't want to talk about it till later for good reason. So do you have any other thoughts on Cersei, Jaime, King's Landing, anything while we're here?
I like that Jaime left her. It's something that we've all speculated on because Jaime is one of those characters where, the very first episode, we watch him push a young boy out a window and cavalierly. And so you start off hating him, but then you watch him go through this metamorphosis. The show has done it where they make him difficult to like again when he tells Edmure Tully that he would throw his baby at the castle and would do anything to get back to Cersei. But Jaime is just this character that he's got so much depth to him. And so it makes you really want him to have a strong character arc and story and that it lasts throughout the series. And
we've been waiting for his arc because it's been a little lackluster so far.
Yeah, but I like that it's happening. I like that we're seeing him finally really see his sister for who she is. And I know that she's pretty much lost her soul now that she has no children. even though she's supposedly pregnant. Yeah. But that baby has to come to fruition, because without her actually taking care of the baby, we even have the scene where she says that she doesn't care about Westeros. She doesn't care about anything. All she cares about are the people that matter to her. She's a horrible ruler. I think she's always been this way, but I think, especially now, just with the demise of the Lannisters and how she told Tyrion that the vultures came in and tore at them, and just the loss of her kids. I think Jaime is finally truly seeing her for what she is, and that his love isn't blinding her anymore. I think he'll always love her, but that it isn't blinding her anymore.
Well, is it more that Jaime sees the real threat, and that's?
But he didn't care before. Cersei was always a threat in some ways, and
No, he sees the real threat of the Whites and the White Walkers. The calculus has changed in that.
Yeah, I liked it where he's like, either, Daenerys loses and they come here and we all die, or Daenerys wins and they come here and we all die.
Well, so they both have some strategic points. So I agree with Jaime that the real threat is up north and nothing else matters if they don't deal with that. But on the flip side, from Cersei's point of view, your two threats that are challenging you are both going to kill each other. And then they'll be presumably weakened by the time they get to you, but that's not true of the dead. So that's the problem, is that by going through the north, they're not going to be weakened. They're going to be doubled if they win. So, but I do kind of, it's not like she's just completely stupid. She does have some strategy going. And
I also think, though, and they have the episode show it, that Jaime cares about honor and his word.
Well, he cares about loyalty, apparently, all of a sudden, yeah.
And this is in the show and the books, Jaime only killed the Mad King because he wanted to set all of King's Landing on fire with wildfire. Right. And he just allows everyone to call him Kingslayer and all these things. But he didn't do it. And the books, George R. R. Martin kind of sets it up, though, where it tells you that Ned finds Jaime sitting on the throne. But Jaime never wanted it. That's the thing. Jaime never wanted to be king. He was just acting pompous and arrogant. But Jaime basically saved everyone's hides and doesn't tell people about it. He actually, I think, has always cared about things like this. And now we're seeing him care to follow through on it in a little bit different way again. And I like that.
But he also threw Bran out a window and killed his cousin so that he could escape from prison. So while he's always had an honorable side to him, let's not...
He's got more honor when it comes to mass destruction and casualties.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, his honor is not for everyone all the time. He's not like a Brienne. But he does say that you live long enough and make enough oaths, it's going to be impossible not to break them.
Yeah.
He says it to Catelyn, and I think there's a lot of truth to that.
So then we had a short scene at Dragonstone. There was a town hall meeting. Nothing to say about that. Then we had an interesting conversation between Theon and Jon. Which I had a little bit of thoughts on.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned to you when we watched the episode that whole conversation was more about Jon than it was about Theon. It's the show's way of telling us that, hey, Jon is Stark and Targaryen. He doesn't know it yet. And he basically tells Theon, you're both. You're a Greyjoy and you're a Stark. And Jon's going to have to go through this exact same difficult journey for himself of feeling kind of wrenched between two houses and loyalties.
Right. Theon said that he was faced with an impossible decision. And is Jon also going to be faced with an impossible decision between Targaryen and Stark, between Dany and his family or something?
Because he's going to be both.
Right. Yeah, and his loyalties. If Theon is a foreshadowing of the things Jon has to face, he's going to have to make some tough calls. But all in all, that scene was good. That scene was well acted. Theon was well acted. And then we got that immediately followed up with the dumbest scene in the whole show, which was Theon fighting.
The whole show or the whole episode?
The whole episode.
So I was like, I don't know. I think there's worse than that. Do you think they told the guy, I forget his name, who plays Theon?
Alfie Allen.
Alfie Allen. Hey, so you're going to get kicked in the nuts a lot in this episode?
Yeah, apparently Ramsay cut out all of his pain receptors down there. No.
And he took the pork and beans.
Yeah, so that was kind of dumb. But not only that, I personally am not interested in a Theon Yara rescue mission kind of thing. With only 6 episodes left, and is that going to be the fall of Euron? Like, is Euron just going to be taken out by the Greyjoys in some lame thing? I want a glorious naval battle or something. I don't want a little family squabble to take out the new bad guy.
If Theon and Yara do take out Euron, they better do a good job of how they make that happen. However, what I do like about, like, I don't like how they pulled it off, but I like what the intention is we're seeing that redemption arc of Theon. And it starts with his conversation with Jon. He's emboldened by Jon forgiving what he can, and by Jon saying, you are still a Stark. You are. And it's basically Theon going to his leader and Jon saying, I give you permission. I give you permission to go, when Jon's like, why are you still here talking to me? But he's also saying, okay, this is done. It's the past. I forgive you. Forgive yourself. Move forward. Or maybe not forgive yourself, but move forward. And then we're seeing him saying, okay, whatever I have to do, I have to go save Yara. And I think he was willing to die for it in that scene.
Well, I just feel like where this is going to lead is that, where it may lead, is that, so we've seen that the Ironborn are the flakiest, flimsy fucks in the whole thing. So if all Theon has to do is show up and...
It's a nice alliteration there.
and kill Euron, and then all the Ironborn will switch to him and Yara. So he'll go over there, some shit will happen, and then he'll have the fleet, or something.
Or Euron gets destroyed another way, and they need a leader to take over, and it'll be Yara.
I'm just personally not really interested in where that's going to go, but what are you going to do? Well, let's get to the incest already.
Okay.
Jon pulls the old knock on the door in the middle of the night technique, and that's all it takes.
Can I borrow some sugar?
And then we get this awkward voiceover.
They did it on purpose. We watched inside the episode, and they did it on purpose because they wanted to take, this huge revelation, this knowledge, and transfer it over onto Jon as showing how he's going to have to deal with this when he finds out. Like, that was all intentional. Did I like the fact that they reveal that, or they make it more of a point in the story that Jon is having sex with his aunt and then immediately showing it? No, that was a bit odd for me.
Yeah, it was just strange. It didn't bother me. I mean, I think they were trying to make people watching being like, oh, and...
No, I think what I don't think they're trying to make people do that. I think they were trying to make people realize the complexity of this issue and the difficulty Jon's going to experience when he realizes I'm in love and I'm mating with my aunt.
But that's the Targaryen thing. Will he even care? He does not aware he's a Targaryen, but once he finds out, he'll be like, well, they always did that,
That's what I think the showrunners were going for, is to show the complexity of what he's headed into by having those two scenes be side by side with Bran and his scene with Sam, and then really quick, what I'll just say, like, I know you want to get to the incest more here.
No, that's all I had to say about it.
But I will say, like, one, I love Sam. I just like parts of that scene just because I like Sam. So, like, what are you doing? And, did you get that with a raven? And I don't understand what that is when he's asking what the three-eyed raven is. Because, like, Bran's just being weird all the time now. And Sam's just kind of being his own lovable self. They didn't show us that moment where he cottons on and say, oh, wait, I realized that the whole, Rhaegar got his marriage annulled to Ilya Martell.
Right, so he was paying some attention.
Well, I wish they could have just shown us, like, given us a minute of screen time of that, whether it was in that one episode where Gilly finds out or here, but there was kind of a jump with that.
Well, weird that Bran needed to be told that so he could find the vision. It's like he's a search function, and you got to Google in what to look for, and then he can go find it. And so Rhaegar, pretty disappointing that he looked exactly like Viserys. Same wig and everything. Like Viserys,
maybe they just tried to get more use out of that wig.
Yeah, Viserys is the biggest creepo in the whole show, biggest loser that we don't think anything of.
Well, and Rhaegar is supposed to be extremely attractive.
Right. And
so is Lyanna. Not to say that either people they cast for them aren't attractive, but I'm talking like end of the spectrum attractiveness level. And I was a little bit like, okay. And they purposely didn't show us his face.
Yeah, we barely saw it, like a profile of his face, and whatever. They all look the same, Viserys and the Mad King and Rhaegar, but I was expecting Rhaegar to look much more pristine and attractive and warrior looking, and not remind us of a total fucking loser that was earlier in the show.
Yeah.
But all right, so we got that little marriage. It's funny, I was talking to someone at jiu-jitsu practice who I was like, yeah, so as much as happened in this show, it kind of just ended where last season ended. Like, R plus L equals J. We basically found that out last season when it showed it, and the guy was like, what? Like, for casual viewers, they don't know what we're talking about. They don't watch closely. So I thought it was clear at the end of last season because they showed the baby after the Tower of Joy, but I guess you gotta listen to our podcast to understand what's going on. But now it is 100%, if it wasn't before, it is 100% confirmed. No more reading between the lines. John's name is Aegon Targaryen.
Which I have a beef with that.
That's freaking weird, too.
But let's explain why this is really weird for all the casual listeners that you're talking about here, is that Rhaegar married Ilya Martell of Dorne and had 2 children with her who were murdered by the Mountain. And one of the kids is named Aegon Targaryen. And so Rhaegar's first son is already named Aegon and was either killed or maybe survived. And we don't know for sure in the books. They don't even have that plot line in the show, so whatever. And then he gets his marriage annulled, gets remarried to Lyanna Stark, has a kid, and that kid is going to be named Aegon Targaryen.
Right. So
that's
there's either
really weird.
Either 2 Aegon Targaryens by the same father alive at the same time, or one had just died and...
No, he wouldn't have just died.
Right, he was still alive, right. And by the way, if you guys don't remember what we're talking about, when Oberyn Martell was yelling at the Mountain, "You raped her! You murdered her children!" That was talking about Rhaegar's wife and 2 children, one named Aegon, that the Mountain killed.
Yeah.
So, right, the choice of giving him the name Aegon is totally bizarre. Maybe the books will turn out that way, but like Kate said, there's also a side story in the books with somebody named Aegon. And yeah, very strange. I wasn't expecting that.
It is very weird, and I hope they follow through on that. Otherwise, that's just really poor writing. Jon and Dany they have hooked up here. This is going on, and it's going to get all complicated. I basically saying I think there's like this forbidden love thing is that they love each other. And clearly they do, because with Bran's narrating during these scenes, he's saying that this whole Robert's Rebellion was built on a lie. He loved her. And then while Bran is saying that, it's a picture of Jon looking at Dany and she loved him. And Johnny's looking back at Jon. So it's pretty much
right,
they love each
thing.
other.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be this forbidden love either because it's incestuous or because he's got to kill her in order to be able to wield Lightbringer in order to kill the Night's King. Which I actually think right now, that's where I'm betting on how I think this is going to happen.
It's just that they've given no attention to swords in this show. So in the books, we have 3 important...
That's not true. They give little attention.
Very little attention, right.
Because they have that whole thing on the beach with Stannis and Lady Melisandre.
I know, but nobody's going to connect that. So what this is that in the books, Stannis has a magic sword called Lightbringer that shines light everywhere. It's kind of like a lightsaber, not that dramatic. But the problem is that his sword doesn't give off any heat. And the real Lightbringer, which is a sword of...
Aemon figured out in the books.
Right.
So he's blind. And I remember he was talking to Sam about it. And he's like, even a blind man can see this. And he's like, there was no heat from that sword.
Right. So the real Lightbringer is a magic sword that looks just like Stannis' sword, but it actually has real heat and real powers. And that's the sword of prophecy. So Stannis, poor Stannis,
Poor Stannis.
No, he's got this sword that Melisandre is glamoring to make it look like a magic sword. Because she's a weirdo and she's trying to trick him or something. So he thinks he has this
Maybe she's faking it until she makes it, until she finds the real one.
Yeah, well, he thinks he has this magic...
Or maybe it is the right sword, but it doesn't work because he's not really the prince that was promised.
Well, that's possible, but there is one problem with that. So, yeah, it is possible. But anyways, he thinks he's the prince that was promised because he's got this magic sword and all this stuff, which is not in the show. But then there's another sword called Dawn, which is Arthur Dayne's sword, which is a magic sword, and it's supposedly crafted from the inside of a shooting star or something like that. Some people think that might be the real Lightbringer, or some people think that's a totally different sword. But none of this stuff is in the books. So if Jon has to kill Dany to power his magic sword or something like that...
You just said none of this stuff is in the books.
None of the stuff's in the show. So if Jon has to kill Dany to power his magic sword or something, we have absolutely no idea that something like that is on
But the
in
show
cards.
does do some convenience, and they could quickly have Missandei or someone just be like, oh, blah, 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 and then they have it happen, and there you go.
Yeah. Plus,
I wouldn't put it past him.
There's also no reason to think that he needs a magic sword. We've already seen him kill 2 White Walkers with Long Claw and everything, so I just think they're abandoning that.
He's getting very good at it.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the Night's King of the Wall, or do you have something else to say?
Well, I do think that we should just talk a little bit about Tyrion. And clearly they gave airtime to Tyrion having some discomfort to Jon and Dany. So you were kind of talking about like Tyrion being unhappy when they were hooking up and that you think that he's going to betray her. But it was just interesting to me of like, is it that he's going to betray them? Like, what are his true motivations for being uncomfortable with it? My initial thoughts just in terms of why he looked so uncomfortable in that particular moment. Just right now where I'm at, I don't know if he's going to for sure betray her. That's kind of your thing. Like, I can see that maybe, but I don't know. I think it's more that he is recognizing how complex things are getting as a result of them hooking up, that they may not be as objective, both independently as King of the North and her being, the queen and all her titles, and that this is problematic. They had that scene where Jorah gives her some insight and then Jon says something and she's like, oh, I'll do what Jon says. Even though it sounds like it makes sense, they still kind of show that some people are like, oh,
sort of
okay.
Compromise her leadership ability.
And Jon's. And Tyrion, because this is the type of thing that Tyrion could see and notice and see how it could be a problem. That's kind of what Tyrion's good at. Well, so that's how I interpreted it. Really,
they don't need the relationship to solidify their alliance. So that's why she left Dario behind, so that she, if necessary, she can marry a Westerosi and have a strong alliance. But she already got Jon to bend the knee, so this romance is...
Well, and I think it could be clouding her judgment and his. And I think he knows that people can be quite foolish for love. He knows that from personal experience, and he's just smart enough. So that's kind of how I took it, and that's where I'm leaving it right now until they give me a little bit more. But maybe kind of going off of this a little bit, let's go back a little bit back to the Dragon Pit. Jon reveals that he is loyal to Dany and has bent the knee to her, but everybody in the Dragon Pit was astonished by this news. And I was, and you could tell, Davos is clearly like upset about it, saying, I wish you hadn't done that. Dany's upset that he says that he's got allegiance to her. Tyrion's upset about it. And you see the shock over everyone's faces. They show it where there's a lot of shock. And that's one thing that I really liked about that scene is they did a good job showing everybody's reactions throughout the whole thing. But why did both Dany and Jon not tell anyone that he bent the knee to her? That's really odd to me. That neither of them thought that was relevant information for any of their advisors.
I felt like they gave us the bent the knee scene, which didn't make a whole lot of sense, so that they could have that next scene in the next episode, basically. So to me, it felt a little bit forced, like, oh, he bent the knee just so we could have this weird thing where Cersei agrees and then disagrees and then agrees. But I don't know, maybe there's something more to it.
And then I was also confused, why were they all so mad? Like clearly Cersei was just looking for a way to be like, yep, sorry, I'm going to be who I've always been. They can't really be that mad at Jon for that. And yet they were all so mad at him. Why?
Yeah. And Jon did what Randall Tarley did. Said, I already got a queen. I think it was a relevant question. She wants to keep the North out of a battle if the two women fight.
It is a relevant question. What I'm saying is I don't think that that's enough. Like, I think Cersei was going to do this anyway, which she still did it anyway.
Well, right.
And the fact that everybody's so easily hoodwinked by her is shocking to me. One, that would be her only reason just not. Like, she's just using that as a way to not be on board. But then even when she pretends to be on board, everyone believes it? Really?
Well, right. And the whole point of her little about face didn't really make sense. I'm going to not back you, then I'm going to back you, but I'm not really going to back you. But whatever.
So, anyway, I'm saying that now about Cersei, but, again, I'm just still a little bit confused why no one told anyone about Jon bending the knee. It's kind of a big deal. Why they were all so angry at him for that.
Well, there's a moral in the story about honesty and stuff.
But he even says it. I know what you're going to say about my dad and blah. Blah, blah, blah. But there's still something to it. And he says it's part of the Northern Way. It's really important that we keep our promises.
Yeah. All right. So it ended pretty much as we expected. The wall came down, at least the big portion of it. Tormund and Beric are, I'm going to predict, alive.
I agree.
I'm going to predict it's like Jaime and Bronn. They're going to wake up on the other side of a bunch of rubble. I don't know if Gendry's there or not, but they're all alive. They're all going to survive that wall coming down. And
maybe Gendry's headed to Winterfell.
Yeah, he's running over there. But there was that was a cool scene. There's not much to say about it, but the army of the dead is big. The giants are big. The dragon is powerful. They're going to be very hard to deal with, which we already knew, but
And the wall came down for the first time in thousands of years.
I like how Tormund didn't even pretend to put up a fight. He just goes, run, which was the total right call to do.
Right, I was going to say, what should he have done?
No, yeah, as soon as a dragon coming, like, we're out. That was a good call.
In the last episode, the Hound says something about, like, I can't remember exactly what it is, but Tormund's response was, because I'm a really good killer. He's basically saying how he survived this long. And one of the other reasons why he survived this long is he's got pretty good intuition about things that are going to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. Know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
My one kind of whinging remark about that is that dragon had a lot of holes in its wings. And I know that there's a lot of magic in Westeros, but dragons that have a bunch of holes in their wings cannot fly.
Well, according to physicists, bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly either, yet they do.
Do they have a bunch of holes in their wings the way that dragon did?
Their wings are anatomically too small to support their weight, according to something I read one time. So here's my big thought.
Is that all you have to say to my holes in the dragon's wings? Is some weird bumblebee?
Well, he looked cool. He looked like an undead dragon, just like the people walking around with their ribs hanging out and stuff. So here's my thought, my big prediction. Cersei's got 20,000 Golden Company coming. I say the Night's King is going to King's Landing first. They made a point to say there's 1 million people in King's Landing. Cersei's got an army of 20,000. He's going to take his dragon there and make a huge army. And then...
So, do you think that Euron ships have something to do with that?
I just think those 20,000 troops are 20,000 more for the Night's King's army. So, Winterfell is not going to be hit first. Winterfell is going to be come at from both directions, from the wall and from King's Landing coming up. Cersei, the Mountain, and a few other people will flee King's Landing, and that's when Jaime will kill her when she arrives at Winterfell, and he realizes that the threat is twice as big as it otherwise would have been because she was too crazy to do what she was supposed to do.
You think he would kill her over that, though?
I think he's the Valonqar. He's going to kill her over something. So,
right, I agree, but I don't think he would kill her because she decided to have more army come over that happened to be turned over by the Night's King. It's a little too far removed to me.
If there's 1 million...
She didn't have them come over so that they would die.
No, of course not. But her bad strategic error, if this happens, I only have one reason to think this. And one, I think it'd be cool and unexpected. Two reasons. And two, we did get in a Bran speedy vision a dragon flying over King's Landing. The shadow of a dragon flying over King's Landing. That could have been a memory. So maybe from when the Targaryens first got there. But it did not happen when Dany arrived with Drogon this episode, which would have made the most sense of a shadow flying over King's Landing. But if Night's King is flying a dragon over King's Landing, I think it'd be cool. And the idea that they're going to go to Winterfell first is also hard storytelling, because they're going to fight Jon first before...
And it would decimate Winterfell.
Right, so we'll see. But that's
which Sansa and Arya and Bran are all at.
Right, so all the characters we care about most are going to be in the north next season. So if I were the Night's King, and I don't know if he knows Westeros geography, I would go there first with that dragon, kill a bunch of people, and make another army. So that's my bold prediction. I think it'd be cool. Well, there's our Season 7, Episode 7 review, and another season of Game of Thrones is done. I'm still going to podcast about other things.
And we could always do... Like, you know how we did the Deadpool podcast?
Yeah, we'll do some extra bonus Game of Thrones stuff to keep you guys busy for the next 18 months. If the Winds of Winter comes out, I will definitely talk about that. We will definitely talk about that.
Maybe we'll have to do it by chapters 1 through 3.
But I will podcast about other things, so I hope some of you will listen to that as well.
I think 2 of our 5 loyal Game of Thrones listeners might.
Yes, I think so too. All right. Thank you. Burr, 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 burr.